Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Manjeet Singh from Punjabi University, Patiala. Today, we are going to discuss about a module on the topic Economic Planning in India under the paper Business Environment. After reading this module, you should be able to understand the concepts related to economic planning in India. You will also be in a position to understand the salient features of Indian economic planning. You should also be in a position to understand the objectives and the evaluation of Indian economic planning. Our objective is also to make you learn the meaning and the role of Planning Commission and the new institution which has come up named as NITI Aayog. India adopted economic planning in 1951 when it launched its first 5-year plan for the period 1951 to 1956. Since then, it has completed 11 5-year plans besides few years of break in the form of annual plans. The country at present has entered into 12th 5-year plan which started from 2012 and will end in 2017. Economic planning may be defined as making major economic decisions regarding what and how much is to be produced, how and when and where it is to be produced, to whom it is to be allocated by conscious decision of the determinant authority on the basis of comprehensive survey of economic system as a whole. At the time India became free, its economy was underdeveloped, with poverty rampant, and the quality of life was dismally low. To raise the level of the living of the people of India, the government took the task of development of the economy through the medium of 5-year plans. This involved a larger role for the public sector and limited role for the private sector and limited place for the market forces. Although much have been achieved since then, but a lot remains to be done. In the early 90s, with the beginning of 1991, the government drastically changed the economic policies. It assigned a larger role to the private sector and has, to the large extent, given market orientation to the economy. In this new phase, planning is being resorted to by the government to guide and direct the economy alongside the path of growth and equity. The system of planning too has undergone changes from the one which involved large many rules, regulations and interventions to one which is more liberal and which is more flexible. Importance and features of economic planning. Following are the major points of discussion about the importance and features of economic planning in the country. First of all, for development. As said earlier, in the beginning, the medium of planning was used primarily for the development of the economy. Other considerations too weighed with the government, and these were important too. But these were of secondary importance. The Indian economic planning was introduced for the development of the nation. Secondly, it is a superior way of development. The most important reason for the adoption of planning was that it was considered as a superior way of developing the economy. It was rightly thought that planning was essential to ensure a quick building of the productive capacity of the country. This was possible because a large and predetermined proportion of the national resources could be devoted to the construction of infrastructure facilities like railways, roads, communication, etc., and capital goods industries like machine equipments and tools, etc. As for the resulting problem of inadequate supplies of consumer goods were concerned, it could be tackled by an equitable distribution of the same, like rationing to protect the interests of the poor. The third aspect is regarding the overcoming weakness of the economy. It was over realized that planning alone could help in getting over the hurdles to the development in the country. One very serious handicap was the lack of an entrepreneurial class. Being an agrarian economy, there was virtually no industrialist. A commercial class did exist, but it was interested in making quick money in the trade. People having money, like moneylenders, were not tuned to investments in the modern activities. They invested in such non development activities such as gold, land, luxury living, etc. Undertaking big tasks, not only to overcome the weakness of the economy, but more than that, planning was to be looked upon as an instrument which could enable the government to undertake many big tasks which cried for big solutions. There was, for example, the great uphill task of pulling up a very low investment rate to a sizable figure in a reasonable period of time. Alongside this, the race for raising the productive capacity of the country, the fast rising population, which could eat into the investment resources, had to be both limited, provided for in respect of such minimum requirements as water, food, clothing, safety for epidemics and floods, etc. Another aspect is meeting initial bad situation. Planning was much needed also for solving many difficult and unprecedented problems arising out of the partition of the country in 1947. It gave rise to the influx of refugees on a mass scale from Pakistan. There was, in the second place, the big loss of raw material producing areas, for example, jute for India. These difficulties got superimposed upon the problems inherited from history, including that of Second World War. That's why the government alone could lay priorities for the resource use in social terms. Another aspect is for guiding and directing the economy. In the new phase of economic development, planning continues to be important. It has now the task of coordinating the diverse activities of the economy to ensure that it grows rapidly and renders social justice to the weaker sections of the population. The state government too has the important role to play, but it has much different from the one it had played so far. Raising efficiency. One important task of the new format of planning is to increase the productivity of the economy in general. The stock of capital has increased considerably. The rate of saving and investment compares well with some industrially developed countries. The industrial structure is now much diversified structure. A large entrepreneurial class has grown. Besides, quite many managerial and technical personnel have come to exist. There are large institutional arrangements to finance and promote development. Another issue is providing for growth and equity. Another important reason for planning is the objective of providing both growth and equity. One aspect of this provision is a larger allocation of resource to private sector, which is now contributing to the growth in the existing lines as also in the several new lines, including some important ones so far reserved for public sector. The public sector is to ensure a large and stronger basis for the economy to grow. Features of economic planning in India. The following points depict the features of economic planning in India. The first one is indicative nature. The aim of 5-year plans is more indicative with the passage of time, and these are so designed as to indicate the economic agents like investors, savers, producers, exporters, importers, bankers, etc. It is indicative in the sense that it merely outlines the directions toward which the economy desires to move. Second is public sector planning. Another important feature of Indian economic planning is that it involves the public sector undertakings for which planning is required. These plans include various schemes, institutional changes, and measures for the fulfillment of planning objectives. Most of these require construction projects, which in turn need investment. Third is decentralized planning. Indian planning system is decentralized in nature, both in the preparation and in the implementation of plans. The planning process involves the partition of people on an extensive scale. This enables the planners of the country to embody the wishes of the people into the plans. Mixed economy planning. A feature of considerable importance is that the planning system works within an economy which combines the private sector with the public sector. Two facets of the country are of key relevance from this angle. One concerns the area covered by the respective sectors. Another feature is planning for growth with equity. Another important feature of Indian economic planning is its concern with both the growth of the economy and rendering the social justice to the underprivileged of the country. Alongside growth, programs are also formulated and implemented, especially for the benefit of the poor and the resourceless. Another feature is different from the old system. The old system was in the nature of a directive system rather than an indicative system as at present. As such, the allocation of many resources in different uses was done in terms of directives of the government. Moreover, the old system with its comprehensive plans, which covered many activities of the economy, relied very largely on the public sector for the execution of programs. Now let us discuss about the objectives of Indian economic planning. The basic plan, if India have been related to the removal of economic backwardness of the nation and to make it a developed country. The plans have also been implemented to ensure that the weaker sections of the population will take benefits from the economic progress of the nation. Various successes have already been achieved in the various areas, but all is not well with the plans which have been implemented so far. Basic objectives. Each plan beginning with the first 5-year plan in 1951, listed the basic objectives of the India's development. These objectives provide, so as to say, the guiding principles of Indian planning. Within this framework, each 5-year plan formulated objectives, keeping in view the problems arising from the constraints and from the new possibilities. This gave rise to the immediate objective of each plan. The basic objective of planning are discussed as follows. Growth. In a country with a very low per capita income, the raising of income is obviously the basic thing to do. The target of growth rate has all along been around 5% of the national income, with slightly higher rate in some of the plans, except in the first plan when the target was lower at 2.1%. The 10th plan target was around 8%. Of the contemplated increase in the two types of goods, namely consumption goods and the capital goods, the emphasis has for long been on the faster growth in the capital goods. Modernization. This means such basic structural and institutional changes in the economic activities that can change the feudal and colonial economy into a progressive and independent nation. As for the structural changes, we may mention some points like a change in the various elements of the composition of production so that the industries can make a contribution on a greater extent to the national income relative to that by agriculture. Self-reliance. The next objective is to make the economy self-reliant. This is to ensure a more equal relationship with the world economy and to reduce our vulnerability to the international pressures and disturbances. This objective has several dimensions like reduction and dependence on foreign trade, getting ourselves self-dependent, etc. It does not include normal capital movements in the form of market loans, foreign equity investments, etc. Social justice. This objective is to render social justice to the poor of the country. This has three principal dimensions like improving the standard of living of the weaker sections of the population, such as the landless laborers, artisans, members of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, etc. Reduction in the inequalities in the asset distribution in rural areas. And thirdly, reduction in the regional and state inequalities. Now, when we critically evaluate the Indian economic planning systems, as we can see from these goals, that goals together make a good reading. These have often been made a subject matter of heated debate and discussion. To form a balanced judgment, we take a note of the criticism leveled against them and see that how far these have been tenable. The following are the points of criticism. Firstly, these plans are considered as too ambitious. One important point of criticism regarding these objectives is that it started in most cases the objectives have not been realized. The reason may be the inadequacy of the resources or defective implementation of plans, but the fact of their non-fulfillment is there. This is not realistic but defeatist. To scale down these objectives is to accept the non-planned situation. This is not realistic planning, but in fact it is a non-planning. Secondly, the major criticism regarding the Indian economic planning is neglect of employment and agriculture. Now, this is another criticism that the objectives are given a scant situation to agriculture development and employment creation. This is considered that employment does not figure prominently in the scheme of basic goals. It is also contended that even as the component of objectives, it is not much emphasized except in the social justice objective. To an extent, this criticism is valid. Some more attention to agriculture and on work creating activities would have provided enough for consumption and employment besides a vast market, a base for market for industrial goods. Predominance of welfare considerations. Another objective, that is that an undue weight has been given to the welfare consideration. In an economy with low levels of and large gaps in production, there is a little justification for the distributive policies or the special employment schemes which have been created. It is also pointed out that large weightage to the welfare implied in the social justice objective goes against the efficiency consideration. Similarly, the development of certain industries, largely for employment's sake or for the non-economic consideration, means little regard for the efficient choices in respect of activities or locations. Another point of criticism is incompatibility and inconsistency. The objectives, when taken together, are illogical technically. As such, these are incompatible with one another and they are inconsistent also. For example, the emphasis on a rapid rise in the capital stock doesn't go well with the objective of reducing inequalities. The former increases wages which form a very small proportion of output or income relatively to the profit. The objective of reducing inequalities, on the other hand, reduces savings because poor beneficiaries have low propensity to save. The Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is the apex body of the planning machinery which was set up in March 1950 by a resolution of the Government of India with varied objectives as already discussed. From the beginning, the Prime Minister has been the chairman of the Planning Commission. It has a deputy chairman and full-time members who include eminent economists and experts in different fields. For administrative purposes, the Commission had a secretary who is assisted by a joint secretary and deputy secretary. Statistical indicators of economic goals. The first one is, in terms of economic goals, high level of aggregate output and income. The statistical goals for this can be the GDP and GNP. Secondly, rapid growth of income. This can be the economic goal, and statistical goal will be the average annual rate of growth of GNP and GDP. Thirdly, in terms of economic goal, greater inequality in income distribution, and its statistical goal can be the Gini coefficient. Fourth one, the economic goal can be more productive employment, and statistical goal for this can be the distribution of labor force by industrial and occupational classification and income. Fifth economic goal can be lower international dependence, and its statistical goal can be foreign trade and international payment and proportions in total output. Sixth, the economic goal can be price stability, and its statistical goal can be price indices. The seventh economic goal can be greater regional balance, and statistical goal can be gross regional product per capita. Formulation of the plan. The preparation of a 5-year plan is usually spread over a period of 2 to 3 years. The first stage is the consideration of the general approach to the formulation, involving an examination of the state of economy, an appraisal of past trends in production, and the rate of growth in relation to the long-term view of the economy. The second stage consists of the studies which are intended to lead to a consideration of the physical content of the plan. While these studies proceed, the Planning Commission constitutes groups for each sector composed of its own specialists and those of the ministries and the non-official experts which review the situation in their respective fields and make the assumptions to be made in the formulation of the plan and indicate the targets of the production to be achieved. On the basis of the preliminary studies undertaken by the groups and discussions they hold with the relevant parties, the Commission presents the main features of the plan under formulation in the form of a draft plan, which is discussed in detail by the Cabinet and is placed again before the National Development Council. With the approval of the Council, the draft plan is published for public consideration and countrywide debate. NITI Aayog, that is the National Institution for Transforming India Aayog. NITI Aayog is an Indian government rethink tank constituted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in order to replace the Planning Commission. Main objective behind establishment for the NITI Aayog is to increase the participation and involvement of the state governments in the economic policy making process. It has adopted a flow of information approach, that is bottom-up approach in planning, which is totally opposite to the Planning Commission's traditional approach of top-down decision making. Significant mandates of NITI Aayog are to bring cooperative, competitive federalism. It is depicted well when Indian Prime Minister appointed 3 subgroups of chief ministers for making suggestions in 3 key areas: centrally sponsored schemes, skill development, and Swachh Bharat. NITI Aayog will give opportunities which the old Planning Commission structure lacked to represent the economic interests of the state governments and the union territories of India. The Prime Minister will serve as the chairperson for NITI Aayog. The Union Government of India announced formation of NITI Aayog on 1st January 2015, and the first meeting of NITI Aayog was held on 8th of February 2015. NITI Aayog consists of a group of people with authority entrusted by the government to formulate and to regulate the policies in social and economic issues with experts in it. Major highlights of NITI Aayog. First, NITI Aayog has consisted leaders from all the 29 states of India and 7 union territories. Prime Minister of the country will act as the chairman. All full-time administrative officers, deputy officers, a deputy chairman, chief executive officer, and experts of the states will be answerable clearly to the Prime Minister of India, and he will be the chairman. New National Institution for Transforming India, that is NITI, will work more just like a think tank or forum and implement and execute programs by taking the advice from the states along with them. This is in sharp contrast with the defunct Planning Commission, which imposed 5-year plans and allocated resources while running roughed over the requests of the various states. The NITI Aayog will also put an end to the slow and tardy execution or implementation of policy by fostering better inter-ministry coordination and better center-state coordination. It will help to evolve a shared vision, national development priorities, and foster cooperative federalism, recognizing that strong states make a strong nation. The opposition Congress has mocked the launch as a cosmetic relabeling exercise. The new body's acronym base name means Policy Commission in Hindi, suggesting a less bold departure than the English version does. Some believe that it is consistent with the negativism that has become the hallmark of Congress. The Commission has remained powerful over the decades, but it had emerged as a sort of parallel cabinet with the Prime Minister as its head. Despite being blamed by the critics for the slow growth that has long plagued India, the Commission survived the market reforms of early 90s, hailing Mr. Modi with its interventions when he was Chief Minister of Industry and investor-friendly Gujarat. Mr. Modi, elected by a landslide victory last year on the promise of the reviving the growth and to create jobs, had vowed to do away with the planning commission that was set up in 1950 by Prime Minister of that point of time, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru. In 2012, the Planning Commission was pillared for spending some 35 lakh to renovate two office toilets. And then it was lampooned for suggesting that citizens who spend rupees 27 or more a day are not very poor. The Commission's power in allocating central funds to the states and sanctioning capital spending of the central government was deeply resented by the states and various government departments. So, dear students, let us now summarize what we have learned from this module. Now, if we trace the history and we see that the concept of economic planning has gone through a metamorphosed change since 1951. Initially, when we talked about planning, it was basically a democratic planning. The focus was on a mixed economy with the equal role of both public and private sectors, though more emphasis was on public sector and many areas were exclusively reserved for the public sector. And the private sector was not given much of the emphasis. But now we have seen that the concept of economic planning has undergone a complete circle. Now, more and more emphasis is on the participation of the private sector and less emphasis is on the public sector. In fact, the disinvestment has also taken place in the public sector. And secondly, when it comes to the institutions which are associated with the development of this economic planning, that has also gone change. Earlier, we had planning commission which was taking most of the decisions and state was given limited roles. But now we have seen that a new concept has come up, a new institution has come up which has replaced the planning commission. It is named as NITI Aayog, which is completely different from the planning commission institution which we were having. Now, states are given more role in the planning activities. So in a way, the planning has again become more democratic with more and more emphasis on states. If the states develop, if they decide about their own priorities and those priorities are taken up by the central government, then the development can become better. That is what the new concept of new trend of economic planning is. Thank you.